The draft was still sitting there, unread, unsent, just blinking at me. I know where you are. I know who you're with. Don't bother coming home. That's what I almost wrote. That's what I wanted to write. But I didn't. I just stared at it, fingers frozen over the keyboard, while the clock on the wall kept ticking like nothing extraordinary was happening, like my world wasn't mid-collapse. Outside, the sky was turning black. Not evening dark, but thunderstorm black. The kind that feels like something's warning you. I heard thunder. I heard the clink of a spoon in a cup that wasn't mine. And then silence. The kind of silence where even the fridge stops humming. I looked around my own kitchen and realized something unsettling. Nothing here had her touch anymore. Not a single thing. Even the mug with her initial was gone. Like she had been slowly removing herself for months, one item at a time. Just subtle enough for me to miss it. But I hadn't missed everything because her phone, the old one she left behind when she upgraded, it still had access to the cloud. And that's how I saw the photos. The ones she never meant for me to see. Not because they were explicit, no, she was more careful than that. But because of the look on her face. Joy. Real joy with him. A man I didn't know. In restaurants I'd never been to. Wearing dresses she said didn't fit anymore. That night, she told me she was having dinner with a former colleague who just moved back to town. The kind of vague that sounds specific. So I waited. Not to confront her, not to scream or fall to pieces. I waited for her to get comfortable, for her to feel safe, for her to sit across from him, sip her wine, probably lie about her husband and how he fixes broken radios and barely talks anymore. Then I changed the locks. Every single one. Deadbolts, garage, even the side gate. She never thought I noticed her sneaking out at night when she claimed she couldn't sleep. I noticed. I always noticed. I just never reacted until now. She didn't know anything yet. I made sure of that. I kept the location settings off, left the lights on like I always do. Her favorite show was still paused on the living room screen. Her cardigan was still folded on the arm of the chair. Nothing to raise alarm. I was calm. In fact, I was so calm it scared me. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I made tea. At exactly 9:12 p.m., her name lit up my phone, and I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered, but I didn't say a word. "Elwood," she said. Her voice was too casual at first, then quieter. "Something's wrong with the door. It won't open." I could hear a man's voice behind her, too far to make out the words, but close enough to know he wasn't just a colleague. "Yeah," I said. A long pause. Then she asked, "What? What did you do?" I finally spoke the words I'd rehearsed all night. Not loud, not angry, just quiet enough to make her feel every syllable. I acted, and then I hung up. What happened after that? That's the part no one saw coming. I didn't turn off my phone. I didn't even silence it. I just placed it face down on the table and waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Then the pounding started. First on the front door, sharp, controlled knocks that said, "I don't want the neighbors to know yet." That was Mbelle. Always polished, always rehearsed. Even when she was trying to cheat quietly, she couldn't risk looking undignified. I didn't move. I just sat in my armchair in the back room, the one she used to call the sad chair because I would retreat there when the arguments were too much. She said it made me look small, pathetic. Maybe I was, but tonight it didn't feel pathetic. Felt like power. The knocking grew louder. She was starting to panic. Then came the doorbell. Once, twice, then 5 times in a row. "Elwood," she yelled, her voice cracking for the first time. "What's going on? Open the door." Still, I didn't move. Then I heard it. Not her voice. His. Low, annoyed, trying to calm her down, not wanting to draw attention. "Just call a locksmith. It's not the end of the world," he muttered. But to her, oh, this was the end of the world. Because this wasn't just a house. This was the stage where she played the role of the doting wife, the victim of my emotional distance. She built her performance here, and now she was locked out of her own show. She tried the garage next. I heard the side gate creak open. I had left it unlocked on purpose like a test. Would she try to force her way back in? She did. She was probably expecting the garage keypad to still work. But I had already changed the access code, the one she gave to him 2 months ago when I was in Wichita at a vintage radio expo. I found it in her sent messages. He had the code. He had my code. Not anymore. When she realized it didn't work, I heard the unmistakable sound of metal. Maybe she grabbed a shovel or a garden hoe. I imagined her standing there, breathless in heels, trying to decide if she should break in or preserve her image. "Elwood, this isn't funny," she yelled toward the side of the house. And then came the part one didn't expect. She laughed. A full, amused laugh. As if this was some weird joke I was playing. Like I was finally growing a spine and she didn't believe it could be real. "Oh my God, are you actually doing this?" she called out, voice muffled through the side window. "This is so dramatic. You've been reading those sad little forums again, haven't you?" I froze. She knew. She always knew when I was lurking online, looking for answers. She mocked it, said it was desperate to read about other people's marital problems just to feel seen. But she never considered that I might start learning from those stories, that I might finally stop swallowing every lie like communion. I got up and walked to the window. I didn't open it. I just looked. She was standing in the driveway, makeup smeared slightly from sweat and stress. He was behind her, pacing like he had somewhere better to be, like he didn't expect this to be messy. These guys never do. They think they're the escape, the fantasy. They don't expect consequences. She spotted me through the glass. "Elwood, please," she said. Her voice had changed. Softer now. Practiced, like she was reaching for the version of me she used to control. But he stepped forward before she could finish. Hands out. Calm. "Look, man. I don't know what you think is happening here, but maybe we should talk like adults." I tilted my head. Like adults. He wanted a civilized conversation now. I unlocked the window just enough to speak through. "You parked in the neighbor's spot," I said flatly. He blinked. "What?" I nodded toward the driveway. "It's permit only. She's petty. She will tow you. I'd move your car if I were you." And then I shut the window again. He muttered something under his breath and walked off toward the car. Belle stayed behind. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there as the first drops of rain began to fall, soaking through the silk of that expensive dress she swore she only wore on special occasions. I watched her pull out her phone. She was calling someone, not me. I already knew what she'd do next, but what I was about to do next, that was something she'd never imagined in a million years. She left eventually. Not quickly, not dramatically. She stood in that driveway until the rain got serious. The kind of cold rain that makes you think twice about every choice that led you to that exact spot. When she realized I wasn't bluffing, she turned and got into his car. No goodbye, no last plea, just a slammed door and the sound of tires hissing on wet pavement. I didn't watch them drive away. I sat back down and waited until I could no longer hear the engine. Then I stood up and went to the hallway closet. Tucked behind the vacuum cleaner, beneath a box labeled Old Chargers, she hadn't touched in years, was a small pry bar. Nothing fancy. I'd used it years ago when I replaced the warped floorboards in our bedroom. Back then, Belle told me she liked how manly I looked holding tools. She said that while messaging someone named TL on Facebook, a stranger I only learned about last week when I found an old backup file in her cloud. He was married. She said they only flirted, but I recognized the tone. It was the same one she used on me when we first met. She gave away her charm like candy and called it harmless. I walked quietly back into the bedroom. The light was soft, yellow, warm, the kind that makes a place look safer than it really is. The third board from the wall creaked when stepped on, but only if you knew to listen for it. I did. I knelt, wedged the pry bar beneath the plank, and slowly lifted. Beneath the wood was a small envelope, untouched since I put it there 3 weeks ago. I hadn't planned to open it until I was gone. I'd written it on the kind of night when everything felt too loud to sleep. It was supposed to be a farewell, a gentle goodbye from the man who'd finally had enough. But now it was something else. I unfolded it. My handwriting was uneven, like I couldn't decide if I was angry or terrified. Maybe both. I read it aloud, as if saying the words would make them more real. If you're reading this, I didn't yell. I didn't hit. I didn't scream. I just left. Because you made me invisible long before you made me single. I folded the paper back in half and slid it into my pocket. She wouldn't be getting that letter. Not anymore. Because now I wasn't leaving. She was. I spent the next 2 hours going through drawers, not rifling, but carefully, intentionally. I wanted to understand how far back this went, how deep the rot had spread. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for truth. I found 3 receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. One of them was dated the same weekend she told me she was visiting her sick cousin in Ohio. The receipt was from a seafood place in Boston. It even had 2 entrees, lobster and steak, and a note on the bottom. Thank you, Riker. Hope she says yes. Hope she says yes. Yes to what? That question wouldn't leave me alone. It gnawed at my ribs like a dull ache, and for the first time that night, I felt something close to fear. Was she planning to leave me? Or worse, were they planning something I hadn't even begun to imagine? My heart pounded. I stood up too fast and nearly knocked over the lamp on the nightstand. And that's when I saw it. Tucked behind a stack of old greeting cards was a small, black flash drive. I held it up like it might bite me. It wasn't labeled. No case, just a plain, beat-up drive that looked like it had lived in that drawer far longer than it should have. My gut clenched. I plugged it into my laptop. There were only 2 files on it. One was a folder named Backup. The other was a video. I hesitated. Everything in me said, don't press play. But I did. And what I saw made my stomach drop. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't even romantic. It was casual. It was her in our bedroom talking to someone behind the camera. Not flirting, not hiding, just comfortable. She was barefoot, brushing her hair, laughing about something that happened at dinner. Our room, my lamp in the background, my voice on the TV from a voicemail playing in the distance, and her talking to someone else like I never existed. I shut the laptop. I needed air. I walked out onto the porch and looked at the quiet, wet street. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like electricity and ruin. I leaned on the railing and took a breath. Then the motion light flicked on. She was back. Alone, hair wet, no umbrella, shoes in her hand, no car. And in her eyes, something different this time. It wasn't confusion. It was dread. She knew. Somehow, she knew I had found something. But she didn't know how far I was willing to go. She didn't knock this time. She just stood there at the bottom of the porch steps, her bare feet sinking slightly into the wet wood, her arms crossed against the cold. Her eyeliner was streaked. Her dress, the one I once complimented before a wedding, hung limp and heavy from the rain. But her expression, still curated, still performative, was the same one she used when we'd argue in public and she needed the world to believe we were fine. I stayed in the doorway, didn't invite her in. I didn't even reach for the handle. Elwood, she finally said, her voice thin and trembling. Can we just talk? It was almost funny, not because of what she said, but because of how long I'd waited to hear her ask for a conversation. Not bark instructions or criticize how I dried the dishes, but talk. And now, when everything had finally boiled over, now she wanted to talk. I stepped aside, but not to welcome her. I sat back down in the chair near the window and gestured toward the porch railing. If you're going to lie, I said softly, you can do it from out there. She blinked like I'd slapped her. Lie? I didn't say a word. She stepped up onto the porch. Barely. She didn't dare get closer. Her hands gripped the railing like it was the only thing holding her up. Okay, she whispered. Okay, you're angry. I get it. But I think there's been a misunderstanding. I smiled. Genuinely. A misunderstanding. As if I'd misread her cozy videos in our bedroom. As if the flash drive had downloaded itself. As if the voice in the background wasn't calling her baby. So I asked quietly, was Riker a misunderstanding too? The color drained from her face. There it was. Proof. Not from any device. Not from a backup file. Just that subtle, involuntary flicker in her eyes. You can't fake that. Not with someone who's seen you laugh in your sleep and sob in the shower. She started. He's just a friend. That line. That classic line. It's the lie people tell themselves right before their world burns down. Friends don't shoot videos in married people's bedrooms, I said. Friends don't help change access codes to garage doors. And friends don't order wine for two at hidden restaurants 4 states away. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She looked around like the answers might be written somewhere on the walls. I was going to tell you, she finally whispered. When? I don't know. She sat down on the top step, hands shaking. And that's when the mask started slipping. Not all at once, but like cracks in old porcelain. She wasn't composed anymore. She was unraveling. And still, part of me ached watching it. Because even now, even after everything, I remembered the girl who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen on our 2nd anniversary. The one who stayed up with me through my father's surgery. The woman who once whispered, "There's no world I want that doesn't have you in it." That woman was gone. In her place sat someone I didn't know. Someone who wore that memory like a disguise. "You were so still," she said suddenly, her voice breaking. "You were always just there, Elwood. You never fought for anything. Not for me. Not for us." That stung because it was partly true. I didn't fight. I waited. I endured. I gave her the space to figure things out, thinking it was patience, but maybe it was just cowardice. I thought I was being loyal, but maybe I was just waiting to be replaced. And she did. "I didn't cheat the way you think," she said, quieter now. I leaned forward. "Is there a better version of this story I'm missing?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. Not a key, not a phone, a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" I asked. "It's the letter," she said. "The one you wrote." I froze. She unfolded it. My letter. The one I had hidden under the floorboard. The one I thought only I had seen. My stomach twisted. "How did you?" "I saw you," she said. "3 nights ago you pulled it out. You read it to yourself. You stood in the mirror and read it out loud." I didn't say anything. "You were awake?" She nodded. "I saw your face. I've never seen you look that alone." She looked down at the letter again, her eyes filling. "You weren't going to say any of this. You were just going to disappear. No yelling, no drama. Just gone." I didn't reply. Couldn't. She wiped her eyes, and that scared me more than anything. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt righteous. But I didn't. I felt heavy because this wasn't justice. This was what was left after everything good had been drained. And yet, part of me still didn't know what I'd do next. She sat there waiting for something. Forgiveness, punishment, an ending. But I wasn't ready to give her anything. Not yet. Because the real truth, the part one hadn't admitted even to myself, was that I had one more move left, and she would never see it coming. She sat there for another 15 minutes, maybe more, gripping that letter like it was a life preserver. But I could see it. The way her gaze kept flicking toward the door behind me, the hesitation in her posture, the part of her that wasn't just heartbroken, but calculating. She wasn't here to confess. She was here to see how much I knew and how much she still controlled. I closed the door without a word. No slamming, no last glance, just a quiet, deliberate closing. She didn't knock again. Instead, she left the letter on the doormat and walked away barefoot. I didn't pick it up. I watched it curl slightly at the corners from the damp air and waited until the sun came up to toss it onto the kitchen counter, where it stayed, untouched, like a crime scene waiting to be processed. The next morning, I drove to the one place I never thought I'd return to, the public storage lot on Old Mill Road. It's one of those places people use when they don't want the stuff they're hiding to be found. I should know. I rented Unit 14B years ago, back when I thought I'd surprise her with a remodeled guest room. I kept tools there, old lumber, a mattress frame we never used. But the surprise was delayed, then canceled, and eventually forgotten. The unit had stayed locked all this time until today. I hadn't told her I was still paying for it. I hadn't told anyone. I rolled up the creaky metal door and stood there in the dust. Most of the contents were covered in tarps, But it wasn't the forgotten furniture I was here for. It was the fireproof safe in the far back corner. I dragged it forward, wiped off the grime, and entered the code. Inside were three things: a manila envelope containing receipts and printed messages I'd been collecting for over a year, a prepaid phone I'd used to contact a private investigator 6 months ago, back when I still doubted myself but couldn't ignore her changes anymore, and a voice recorder. It was the recorder that made my chest tighten. I hadn't touched it since the night I left it running under the passenger seat of her car. At the time, I thought it was petty, paranoid. I almost threw it away the next morning, but something in me said, "Hold on." So I did. I pressed play. Her voice filled the small space. Clear. Too clear. "He won't leave me. He's too soft. He'll sulk, maybe cry, but walk away? Never." A man's laugh followed. "Then you're free. Isn't that what you wanted?" She answered without hesitation. Yes. There was no pain in her voice. No regret, just certainty. I don't remember sitting down, but I did. Right there on the concrete floor, the dust settling around me like snow. I wasn't even angry. Not in the way people expect. There was just this cold emptiness, like I had opened a door expecting warmth and found wind instead. I replayed the part where she said I was soft. She wasn't wrong. I let her talk over me. I let her make decisions and never questioned them. I let her turn our home into her domain while I quietly repaired light fixtures and fixed broken chair legs in silence. But what she misunderstood, what Riker didn't know, was that softness is not weakness. Softness can be strategy. That day, I didn't go home. Instead, I made 5 phone calls. First to the bank, then to the realtor handling my uncle's property in Vermont. Then to the attorney who helped me draft a postnuptial agreement last year. Another paranoid move I made when I noticed she started going through my desk drawers. Fourth, I called the PI and asked for the rest of the files he never sent because I changed my mind. And the 5th call was to the locksmith again. I wasn't changing locks this time. I was preparing to transfer the deed to the house to someone else. Someone who'd been waiting 2 years for it. Someone who didn't mind that the living room smelled faintly of old cedar and forgotten joy. I would leave quietly, but not before I took back everything she assumed was hers. Because there's a kind of revenge you don't scream about. You don't record it. You don't even talk about it with friends. You execute it silently with the kind of calm precision that makes people question whether you were ever really broken at all. And Belle? She had no idea what was already set in motion. She thought I was just sitting in that chair again, waiting for her to show up. She didn't know that by the time she knocked next, the house, the finances, and the story she'd built for herself would already belong to someone else. I hadn't expected anyone to show up that morning. The paperwork had already been filed, and I was less than 72 hours away from being gone for good. No screaming match, no police report, no dramatic Facebook announcement. Just an empty closet and a silence that would explain more than any letter ever could. I was standing in the garage, boxing up tools she never noticed I kept. That was the funny part. I spent years fixing things in this house. Leaky faucets, cracked tiles, sagging doors, and yet none of it mattered to her because I wasn't flashy. I didn't make grand gestures. I just showed up, again and again, quietly. That was my love language, and she didn't speak it. Then came the knock. Not the front door this time. The side entrance, the one that led into the kitchen where she used to leave the door slightly open when she was baking. The knock was soft. 2 taps, pause, then 1 more. For a second, I thought it might be her. That maybe after all the lies and all the silence, she'd come to throw herself at the truth and beg for a chance to start over. It wasn't her. It was her sister, Loretta. I hadn't seen Loretta in nearly a year. Not since the family barbecue when she drunkenly told me, "You deserve better, but don't tell her I said that." She looked older. Not in a bad way, just more tired. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. From knowing. "Elwood?" she said, barely lifting her chin. I nodded and moved aside. I didn't want to talk, but I respected her enough to listen. She stepped into the garage and looked around like it was sacred ground. "So, you're really doing it?" "I already did." She crossed her arms. "She's unraveling." "Good. You don't want to know how bad it is?" No. She paused, studying me like I was a museum piece. She lied to me too, you know. Said you were the one who changed. Said you were controlling, cold. That you stopped touching her like a husband should. I didn't flinch. I'd heard the narrative before. I'd heard it from neighbors, from mutual friends, from that one smug guy at her office who once told me marriage is a contract, not a fairy tale. She said you broke her, Loretta whispered. I finally looked her in the eye. Did she tell you about the flash drive? About the video in our bedroom? About the letter she stole from under my floorboard? Loretta didn't respond. She said I broke her, I repeated. She dismantled me piece by piece, then blamed me for being hollow. Loretta looked like she wanted to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. It was sealed. No return address. She asked me to give you this. I told her it was a mistake. I told her you were too far gone, but she begged. So here. I didn't reach for it. Please, Loretta added. If you don't open it, she'll think you never cared. I nearly laughed. I stopped caring the day she invited him into our house and used my voice on speakerphone to distract me while he snuck out the back door. Loretta flinched. She hadn't known that part. Tell her I said that I did care. That's why this hurts like hell. And that's why she doesn't get to rewrite the ending. I turned back to the workbench and picked up the screwdriver I'd been holding. Loretta stood there for a while longer. Then she placed the envelope on top of the toolbox and left without another word. I didn't move, didn't open it. Instead, I waited until I heard her car pull away, then walked back to the envelope and, without opening it, fed it directly into the shredder. Because whatever she wrote in that letter, it wasn't for me. It was for her, to soothe her guilt, to craft a version of herself where she was still the protagonist, where this whole thing was just a tragic misunderstanding. I wasn't interested in her redemption arc. I was writing my own story now, and it wasn't over yet, because later that afternoon, something happened I never expected. An email. Not from Belle, not from Loretta, from Riker. He used an anonymous email address, but he wasn't smart enough to mask the metadata. I saw the IP. I knew it was him. The subject line was simple: you need to stop. There was no greeting, no explanation, just a short message. You've made your point. She's broken. Are you proud of that? Walk away, Elwood. Be a man. I read it twice, then 3 times, and slowly, I smiled. He had no idea what I was capable of, because I hadn't even started. I didn't respond to Riker's email, not with words. Instead, I uploaded the voice recording, the one where Belle told him I'd never leave, that I was too soft to act, to an encrypted folder, along with a series of photos I'd taken of her and Riker leaving that hotel on Westgate Avenue. Time-stamped with the same date she told me she was at a church retreat. I added screen captures from the flash drive, chat logs, bank statements, travel history. I didn't plan to send it anywhere. Not yet. But I gave the folder a name that only she would understand if she ever saw it. Purity. That was her word, not mine. One she once used at our wedding rehearsal in a whisper I'll never forget. She leaned in, squeezed my hand, and said, "This is the one pure part of my life. No shadows, no secrets." Now it was the name of a digital time bomb. After I created the folder, I backed it up to 2 cloud accounts. One under my name, one under an alias I created when I was 17 and thought I'd become a novelist. I hadn't logged into it in years. It was perfect. Then I set a timed release. If I didn't deactivate the countdown in 7 days, the contents would be emailed to 2 people, her boss and her mother. Why those 2? Because her boss had no idea that Belle had been funneling company money into personal travel expenses. That steakhouse in Boston? Business account. And her mother, well, she already didn't like me. She blamed me for sapping the sparkle from her daughter. I was the boring guy, the fixer of radios, the man who never took charge. So, let her see the other side now, the side her daughter never confessed to. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because I had lived in her illusion long enough. I was done playing the fool. That evening, I drove out to the lake house, my uncle's property, the one I was finalizing the paperwork for. I needed somewhere silent. Not the kind of silent that makes your thoughts louder, but the kind that makes them stop altogether. The place was dusty and used, but the plumbing worked and I had cell service. I turned off all notifications except one. A motion alert connected to a hidden camera I placed in the garage before I left. Not to spy, to be sure. I knew her well enough to know she'd try to come back when she realized I wasn't reacting anymore. She didn't know how to function without control, without being the center of gravity. And people like her don't grieve the relationship. They grieve the loss of control. It happened on the third night. 1:43 a.m. motion alert triggered. I opened the live feed. There she was, hood up, gloves on, digging through drawers in the garage like she'd left something behind. Maybe she thought I'd hidden the flash drive again. Maybe she wanted to find the phone I used to talk to the PI. Maybe she was just grasping at anything that could give her leverage. But that wasn't what caught my attention. She wasn't alone. Riker was standing behind her, watching the door, clearly uncomfortable, pacing like a man who was finally realizing what he'd gotten himself into. They whispered. She looked frantic. He kept checking his phone. Then, just before they left, she slammed her palm down on my workbench and cursed so loudly I could hear it through the mic. She had lost something, but it wasn't physical. It was me, and she knew it. The next morning, I got a text from Loretta. No greeting, no pleasantries. Just this. She's spinning out. She's blaming you for everything. She told Mom you erased her life. I didn't reply because in a way I had. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I was erasing the story she had built. The one where she was the misunderstood wife trapped in a quiet marriage with a man too passive to breathe. But then came the real surprise. Another email, this time from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Henry Holloway, an old friend, former roommate from college. I hadn't seen him since the wedding. His message? I know this is strange, but I need to tell you something about Mbel. It's about what happened before the wedding. Call me. I stared at it, not breathing, because whatever I thought I knew about Mbel, whatever lies I thought I had already uncovered, that message told me something different. The story wasn't over. It had never even begun. I sat with the email from Henry Holloway for hours before calling. I was nervous, not because I was afraid of what I'd learn, but because I wasn't sure I had the energy left to dig deeper. I was already rebuilding from ash. What else could possibly be hidden beneath it? But I called anyway. Henry picked up on the first ring. Elwood, he said, and just hearing my name in his voice brought back a dozen memories. Late nights, dumb jokes, the kind of loyalty you forget people used to have for you before adulthood stretches everyone too thin. He didn't waste time. I know I should have told you this years ago, he said, but the truth is, I didn't think you'd believe me back then, and I thought maybe if I kept it buried, it would stop mattering. What is it? I asked. He took a breath. 3 weeks before your wedding, Mbel kissed me. Silence. She said it was a mistake, that she was overwhelmed, that she wanted to feel something wild before settling down. She swore it meant nothing, and I believed her. I thought it was just cold feet. But now I know it was just who she was all along. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel shocked. I just closed my eyes and nodded, even though he couldn't see me, because it made sense. Of course, it started back then. It wasn't some sudden fracture. It was a slow, silent rot, one I mistook for settling, for routine, for reality. Why tell me now? I finally asked. Because I heard from Loretta, and because I saw your name in the local listings. She's losing the house, isn't she? Not mine anymore, I said calmly. Henry exhaled. I'm sorry, man. I really am. I'm not, I said. Not anymore. And for the first time in months, I meant it. That weekend, I went back to the lake house. This time, not to hide, but to live. I opened the windows, cleaned the fireplace, repainted the porch railing. There was a peace in every motion. Not the numb kind, but the kind that comes when your life finally matches the truth. I took long walks. I read again. I even fixed an old radio I found in the attic, a 1962 Zenith AM/FM, all rust and potential. When I finally powered it up and heard soft jazz crackling through the static, I smiled so hard it surprised me. That smile hadn't visited in a long time. A few weeks later, Loretta called again. She's moved out, she said. Riker's gone, too. She's staying at Mom's for now, and she's quiet. Good, I replied. She asked if you'd ever speak to her again. I didn't hesitate. No. Loretta paused, then added, You were always the better person. I hope you know that. I wasn't, I said gently. I just became someone I can live with. That evening, I sat out on the dock with a thermos of coffee, wrapped in an old blanket, watching the water glow orange under the setting sun. No noise, no tension, no pretending, just stillness. Then from behind me came footsteps on the wooden planks. I turned, startled, until I saw who it was. A woman with a travel bag, wind-blown hair, and a smile that wasn't searching for an opening, but offering a moment. Her name was Tess. She was the notary who helped with the final deed transfer. We'd spoken twice, both times brief, kind. But she remembered the name of my dog from a story I told, and that meant more to me than all the grand apologies Belle had never made. You said the coffee here was better than any city roast, she said. I poured her a cup. She sat beside me, both of us wrapped in silence. A warm, safe silence. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The final chapter of your story doesn't have to be revenge. Sometimes the real victory is becoming someone who never needs it. And I did. Quietly, softly, completely.